For about 15 years, I've been thinking about just the kinds of implications of the technologies we're developing and the society that we've built. And those implications have included, always, environmental implications. And so in the early 2000s, around 2003, when Alex, Stefan, and I decided to start a blog together, it was inevitable that what we would start with World Changing was something that focused on the environment, but really had as ancillary discussions issues around technology, around global politics, and all of these issues that seem to fit together as a way of understanding how to build a better world. My consulting work and Alex's consulting work, we had discovered independently that there was abundant interest in and discussion of problems. Organizations and institutions and companies really wanted to focus on disasters that were unfolding, and very few people really had an interest in discussing solutions. Really, if you want to have an impact, you have to talk about what to do. The solutions to many of the environmental and developmental and political, economic, social problems that are out there are not off in the future. Now, there may be new solutions that happen off in the future, or better solutions that happen off in the future, but we have today everything that we need to deal with poverty, to deal with famine, to deal with the climate crisis. All of those tools are here. They just need to use them. So in the argument that I write about the open future, the notion that we have three cornerstone issues that will help shape the outcome of this century. The first is the climate crisis, what's happening with global warming and sustainability in general. The second is the rise of molecular manufacturing, also known as nanotechnology. And the last is the issues around global poverty and the distribution of food, wealth, and ideas. All of these are intrinsically connected. If you are to succeed in any one of them, you have to deal with the others. For example, if you're going to deal with global poverty, you're going to have to deal with global warming, because as the climate gets worse and as environments disintegrate and environments collapse, it becomes harder and harder for people in the developing world to actually survive. With molecular manufacturing, nanotechnology, which, as an aside, is not simply the nanoparticles that you might find in sunscreen these days. What I'm talking about with nanotechnology are the kinds of molecular manufacturing technologies which aren't quite here yet, but the various pieces are coming together, and it's not outside the realm of possibility that we'd see it emerging by the midpoint of the next decade. The onset of these technologies fundamentally changes how we construct our economy, how we construct the material goods in our economies, how we ship things, how we get our energy. On the one hand, you have the potential for molecular manufacturing to be one of the engines of moving us into a solution. Because it turns out that one of the best things you can make with this kind of manufacturing technology are incredibly cheap, powerful photovoltaic panels. You can't deal with any one of these without really taking steps to deal with the other two. Everything's connected. Fortunately, the solutions are connected as well. And so coming up with interesting solutions for one will inevitably inform the kinds of solutions we can come up with for the others. As these concepts become more commonplace, what happens is that they disappear into the woodwork. They really become expectations. And I'm hoping to see that transformation from visibility to expectation. And the parallel that I like to use is with cigarette smoking. In the United States, you look back 20 years, 25, 30 years, the percentage of adults who smoked in the US was something around 50%. And even though there had been for decades medical reports saying that cigarette smoking was linked to cancer, there was enough uncertainty and doubt and pseudo-skepticism, most of which was funded by the cigarette industry, as we now know, that the overall public discourse around smoking was, yeah, it's gross and it's probably awful, but nobody really knows. Something happened in the 70s into the 80s, and that discourse shifted. Suddenly, even though the connection between any given pack of cigarettes and any given instance of cancer, no more certain in 1985 than it was in 1965, the public had gathered enough information, had really reached that point of decision where no longer were they willing to put up with fear, uncertainty, and doubt generated by the cigarette industry. Just as very soon we're moving into a world where no longer will we put up with the fear, uncertainty, and doubt generated by the carbon industries. You can't draw a connection between global warming and Hurricane Katrina. No, you can't. But what you can say is because of global warming, what we are likely to see are a lot more of things like Hurricane Katrina, or the drought and wildfires in Southern California, or the floods in Europe. The biggest companies in the world are deeply embedded in the carbon industries, whether it's ExxonMobil or General Motors or Toyota for that matter. These are all companies, these are all very, very well-off and rich individuals who stand to lose some money. Maybe not a lot, maybe quite a bit. And so this combination of resistance to change and greed and cognitive dissonance around just the impacts of what you're doing, I think these play into the choices of people, not all of them, some people in the carbon industries to attempt to delay. And then you have people who are just politically evil. I mean, you have some people who just, for whatever reason, have decided that their goal is to maximize short-term results for a very limited number of people that are their political allies, that are their political supporters, and the future be damned. We have had for years, and we increasingly, every day, have more solutions in our hands now that work to deal with global warming, that work to resolve poverty, that work to help our understanding of the impacts of new technologies, new transfigurative technologies. We have these solutions in our hands. We know what we need to do. And because we have that knowledge, because we have that capacity, I still believe in human beings enough to think that eventually there's a good chance we will pull it out. Is it guaranteed? By no means. Is it possible? Most definitely.